Om Namo Narayanaaya. Om Namo Narayanaaya.
Asmad Gurubhyo Namaha, Asmad Parama Gurubhyo Namaha, Asmad Sarva Gurubhyo Namaha. So we're continuing on with our reading of Sri Vaishnava Brahmins. And we got up to the section where we're going to start talking about the Alwars. So, the Alwars, part 4. The Alwars who are recognized and whose writings have been codified into what is now called the Nalayira Prabandham, or it's also called the Nalaya Divya Prabandham, Divya meaning divine. Prabandham is the Prabandhas. When we refer to each verse in these 4,000 verses, we call them Prabandhas. It's a type of Samal verse. Anyway, so then we have also the word Nalayira. Nala means in Tamil 4, and Ayira means 1,000. So Nalayira means 4,000, and there are 4,000 of these verses. So 12 in number. Okay, so some people say that there are 10 alwars, some people say there are 12 alwars. The normal number is quoted as 12. The people who say that there are 10 alwars are saying they're discounting 2 alwars, Madhurakavi Alwar, who was a disciple of Nam Alwars and who only just praised his guru and didn't write anything directly in praise of God, or Sriman Narayana, and Andal, who is Goda Devi, who is considered to be an incarnation of Bhudevi, the goddess of the earth, and so therefore she's considered the divine consort of the Lord and not classified as an Alwar. So there are some people who will say that there are 10. Okay, you might hear that. But normally they say there are 12 and they include those two, Madhurakavi and Nandal. Okay, so they are detailed below according to their traditional dates, and modern scholars may have some different dates, or historians may try to give us some different dates, but these are the traditional dates, which is stated in each case. So he's divided them up into 3 classes: the very ancient, the middle, and the more recent. More recent is even quite old. Okay, and the terminology here is used BC. BC is AD and BC. BC means before Christ. AD means in the year of our Lord, Anno Domini. Right. So today we don't use that terminology normally in scholarship. We usually say CE in Common Era for what was used to be AD, and for BC we say BCE, before Common Era. Okay. Why the Alwar is different from the Acharyas? Okay, so if we look at the lineage, at the Sri Vaishnava lineage, in fact, coming from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sriman Narayana, to Mahalakshmi, to Vishvaksena, all in Sri Vaikuntham, and then to Nam Alwar. Nam Alwar is actually like the first person in this world to be part of the lineage. And then from Nam Alwar to Natha Muni. Natha Muni is an Acharya. He is considered the first Acharya. So the Alwars are a group of God-loving, absorbed in the devotion of God saints, and therefore, because not all of them had disciples, not all of them, not all of them were engaged in initiating people into Vaishnavism, but the word Alwar means to dive deep into the devotion of the Lord and to be experiencing the great, the great pleasure of serving the Lord or meditating on the Lord. So they experience great devotion. So they're a little bit different from the Acharyas. The Acharyas have a particular function in the lineage. Nam Alwar, in fact, did also that function in the sense that he is part of the lineage and comes before Natha Muni and after Sadakopan, or Sadakopan comes after. His other name is Sadakopan, after Vishvaksena. But the Alwars in general, the other Alwars, they don't form a part of the lineage. So the Alwars are seen as a separate group, though there's that overlap between Nam Alwar and the lineage, the Guru Parampara. Okay, were the Alwars Bhakti Yogis or were they Brahmanas? Okay, so let's read about the Alwars. Let's hear some more about the Alwars. The Alwars, according to the definition in Sri Vaishnavism of Bhakti Yoga, which is different from the definition of Bhakti Yoga, perhaps with other Vaishnavas. In order to perform Bhakti Yoga, one has to be male and has to be a Trivarnika, a Brahman, Kshatriya, or Vaishya by birth. Okay, so unless you're a Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya by birth and a male Trivarnika like that, you are not eligible or qualified to perform Bhakti Yoga in the sense of Bhakti Yoga, which depends upon performing different ceremonies according to the scriptures, which only a Trivarnika male can do. Okay, so if we say that the Alwars are Bhakti Yogis, that means we're redefining Bhakti Yoga. That's not the way the tradition or the Shastra defines Bhakti Yoga according to Sri Vaishnavas. And so therefore we can't say that they were Bhakti Yogis. But some of them were Trivarnika males. There were Brahman males, there were Kshatriya males, like Peri Alwar was a Brahman, Kulashekar Alwar was a Kshatriya. Okay, these persons certainly have the right class or caste, and they have the right gender to be qualified for Bhakti Yoga. However, the first 3 or 4 Alwars are called Ionages. They're not even born of any mother, so they're not classified as having any particular caste. Even when they talk about Nam Alwar, we talk about Nam Alwar being born in a low caste or a low class. Some of the other Alwars similarly like that. Tirupan Alwar. Tirupan Alwar couldn't even enter into the temple. On the other hand, you might have people who are Brahmins like Tondradi Podi Alwar. Okay, so some of them had that qualification where they could have performed Bhakti Yoga. So maybe if we look at their activities, we can see whether they were Bhakti Yogas or Prapanas. But certainly, right, the idea in Sri Vaishnavism is that those persons who are not qualified for Bhakti Yoga can perform Prapatis. So in that sense, Sri Vaishnavas never think of anybody in their sampradaya as being really a Bhakti Yogi, because they don't. Although, according to the Vadagalai school, the northern school of Sri Vaishnavism, Bhakti Yoga is a path which somebody can take to if they're qualified for it. Still, even the great acharyas in the Sri Vaishnava lineage who were great male Brahmanas did not consider themselves to be Bhakti Yogis. They all followed the path of Prapati. So really, truly speaking, we can't look at the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya and see anything but Prapati and Prapanas. It doesn't matter whether they're Vadagalais or Tengalais, everybody is performing Prapati and not Bhakti Yoga, technically, like that. Now, are people who are Sri Vaishnavas performing Bhakti, acts of devotion? Surely they are. Everybody is doing that, right? Everybody is performing service, which is devotional to the Supreme Lord, like that. The difference is that Bhakti Yoga is a specific sadhana. It's a specific process or an upaya, a means to attain moksha. If you perform acts of devotion with the goal of attaining moksha, that is called Bhakti Yoga. Okay, so if you perform acts of devotion without any ulterior motive, even to attain moksha, right? That's stated in scriptures. What is it? Akama savakama va moksha kama udaradi kivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param, like that. So you can look in the Bhagavad-Gita, it talks about people who have all desires, who have the desire for liberation, who have no desires, which is called Nishkama Karma. So karma means work. Nishkama means without desire. So Karma is work, and K-A-long-A-M-A is desire. So Nishkama, without desire, karma, work. Nishkama Karma is desireless work. We are not desiring for anything like that. So this is described by the Vaishnavas also in Sri Vaishnavism. we understand that this is the way to serve the Lord. A prapana person who's surrendered to the Lord will serve the Lord in that way, without any desire for any gain for himself. Okay, so let's go into the three sections of the alwars here. We have 12 alwars, and it looks like that he's attempted to put them in chronological order here. Well, not quite, because he's got down in the, not exactly but he's listed them in a particular order, and we can see down as we go along. Anyway, so we've got Pogai alwar, and he gives if there's a Sanskrit name for the alwar, he'll also give the Sanskrit name next to the Tamil name. So Pogai alwar, born 4203 BC. Buddha alwar, also Pogai alwar, also called Sari Yogin in Sanskrit. Buddha alwar or Bhuta Yogin, born 4203 BC. Pe alwar or Mahat or Branta Yogin, right, born 4203 BC, and Tirumalashai alwar, born 4203 BC. So these first four alwars are, the first three at least, are called Mudal alwars, the first alwars. And Tirumalashai alwar was a disciple of Pe alwar. So we have Pogai, Buddha, Pe alwar, and Tirumalashai alwar. These are the ancient alwars, born just before the beginning of Kali Yuga, a few weeks before the beginning of Kali Yuga. The middle set of alwars, Nam alwar, also known as Sadakorpan, Madhurakavi alwar, his disciple. Nam alwar, born 3102 BC. Madhurakavi alwar, also 3102 BC. Then Kulashekara alwar, born 3075 BC. Then we have Peri alwar, in Sanskrit called Vishnu Chitta, born 3056 BC. And we have Andal, or Goda Devi, right, born 3005 BC. Right. So now we have the recent section, Tondaradi Podi alwar, also known in Sanskrit as Bhaktangri Renu. The word Bhaktangri Renu means the same as Tondaradi Podi in Tamil. Okay, so Tondara is a devotee of the Lord, or a refugee, a prapana to the Lord. Tondar Adi Podi. Adi means the feet, or the feet of so Tondaradi means the feet of the devotees. Podi in Tamil means dust, so the dust of the feet of the devotees. And in Sanskrit, that is Bhakta Angri Renu. Angri Renu means the dust of the feet of the bhaktas. Okay. He born BC 2814 BC. So then we have Tirupan. It says here Tirupani alwar. It's Tirupan alwar, in Sanskrit Yogi Vahan, like that. He's called Yogi Vahan because he was carried by one of the priests of the Sri Rangam temple into the temple itself. Born BC 2760. And then Tirumangai alwar, the last of the alwars chronologically, although we see here that, oh, I see, BC. Okay, so it's getting, yes. So he has put them totally in chronological order. BC 2706, because as we go in BC, as we get closer to the present, the numbers go down. So 2706 BC. Okay, so that he's also named Tirumangai alwar, Sanskrit name Parakala. Now, sometimes you'll hear Sri Vaishnavas talk about Nam alwar, and they'll just simply say alwar. If you hear a Sri Vaishnava talk about alwar, it means Nam alwar. You know. So similarly, if they're talking about acharyas and they talk about butter, they're talking about Parashara butter, not Vedavyas butter or some other butter, like that. So normally these people, because they're so like Nam alwar and Parashara butter, are so important that their names just get shortened amongst Sri Vaishnavas to alwar and butter. Okay. So in the above enumeration of alwars, it is seen that some are recent and some are middle, while others are ancient. If you can call 2706 BC recent, that's recent for alwars, traditional dates. Okay. The nearest dates of birth of all these alwars, as held by the Orthodox Sri Vaishnava community, are also given. And I just want to mention a book here. There's a book called The Holy Lives of the Alvars, or the Dravida Saints, by Alkondavili Govindacharya, and it has actually in the beginning of it, it has a fold out chart with all the dates, the exact dates, and the stars under which all of these Alvars were born, and circumstances, the place where they were born, the star, the particular day, which is called the Tirunakshatram, or the birthday of these Alvars. So if anybody wants that, they can get in touch with me. There's an email at the end of the video, and we can show them where they can download that book, and they can go through the traditional stories of the Alvars there. So the nearest dates of birth of all these Alvars, as held by the Orthodox Sri Vaishnava community, are also given. On going through the dates of birth, we find that all of them were born before Christ, and the last of them about 2,700 years before Christ. In other words, the last of them was born 4,627 years ago, as of the publishing of this book, and the earliest and the first 6,130 years ago. And those are the traditional dates. Several amongst modern critics are not disposed to give the Alvars any antiquity, and so they place them only in the 4th, 5th, or 6th century AD. Okay. So the dates given according to the traditional account are considered by them to be fanciful and untrustworthy. There are a few critics who say that the Alvars must have been contemporaneous with Ramanuja, or that they flourished after him, right? So this is, there would be very few people to say that these days, because we know that contemporary acharyas with Ramanuja, who lived 1,000 years ago, right, knew about the prayers of the Alvars already. So, that's not, I don't think there's anybody today who says that the Alvars were contemporary or after Ramanuja. After Ramanuja, that would be very strange. Both these views are considered by Sri Vaishnavas to be preposterous, right, and have no basis of any kind to support them. But, people have their ideas. The hierarchy and the dates in which the various Alvars flourished, and which the Sri Vaishnavas believe are true, is based on their Guru Paramparas, right? So there are some books that called Guru Parampara Prabhavam, which explains about the lineage, a traditional book, which is a traditional account of their acharyas and Alvars. The account given in the Guru Paramparas of the Alvars and acharyas down to Ramanuja, the great reformer, is similar in both the Vadagalai and Tengalai Guru Paramparas. Okay, so there are a couple of different books called Guru Parampara Prabhavam, and one is followed by the Vadagalais, one is followed by the Tengalais, but they're down to Ramanuja, down to the point of Ramanuja, they're pretty much the same. Okay, so now, as regards the individual lives of these Alvars and acharyas, modern scholars question the ages assigned to some of them. Some of the acharyas are held to have lived 25 years, while others to the ripe age of 135. These ages are considered by the present-day English-knowing scholars to be rather high, and they allow only 80 or 90 years of age as a maximum. Sri Vaishnavas consider that these scholars ignore two important facts. In the first place, the Alvars and the prominent acharyas were men of great intellectual capacity and ability, and so they were above the average level of men in general. Secondly, even ordinary men are now known to live over 130 years of age. That's what he says. If we believe the accounts given in the daily paper, the Hindu, right, Hindu, and a review in the Indian Review, these are two famous South Indian papers. For the Hindu, I know the Indian Review may also be still published, but the Hindu is definitely still published in South India. Usually, the main place it's published is in Chennai or Madras, but it's also published editions in different places in Tamil Nadu. In English, for example, there is in one of the issues of the Daily Hindu in the month of August 1927, the photograph of a person called Zara Aga, whose present age is 146 years. Okay, so we can go look in the archives of the Hindu newspaper, and we can maybe find that story and have a look at that. The same photograph was also reproduced in the Indian Review in the September number of the year 1927 in page 600. Okay, so maybe he has reproduced that. The Swadesh Mitran, a Tamil daily newspaper, right, published in Madras, in its issue of 11th October 1927, announced that a Mohammedan saint named Syed Habib Alat Run, who hailed from Medina, which is a holy city for the Muslims in Saudi Arabia, and who is living at Hyderabad in Nizam's dominions. So at the time, this book was printed during the British Raj before India became independent from the rule of the British. And so there was in Hyderabad, which was in present day Andhra Pradesh in India, that Hyderabad was that area was governed by a person called the Nizam. So there were a lot of Muslims there, and there was a Muslim ruler called the Nizam of Hyderabad. So it was called the Nizam Dominions. Breathed his last in his 130th year. So they have an example in another newspaper of a person who lived for 130 years, a Muslim saint in Hyderabad. Okay, so the Sri Vaishnava Brahmins do not worry themselves as to the correctness or otherwise of the dates of birth or the periods in which the Alvars flourished. That's a very important statement there. It is not that to be a Sri Vaishnava, you have to believe the traditional dates or you have to believe the historical dates. You don't have to believe any of those dates because it's not really important for Sri Vaishnavas. What's more important is the works that the Alvars gave us and the devotional sentiments that they expressed in those works and the philosophical meaning of the Nalaya Divya Prabandha. That is much, much more important than arguing about exactly when they were born. They're content with the view stated in their Guru Paramparas and believe in the traditional account given in it. So to most Vaishnavites, it is immaterial whether an Alvar was born 10,000 years ago or in recent times. They are particular only about the correctness of their views and the proper understanding of such truths as are set forth by the Alvars and the Acharyas. According to these men, the antiquity or modernness of the Alvars and Acharyas do not in any way detract from the value of the spiritual truths promulgated by them, and the faith excited remains unaffected by such incidents. So sometimes there's a saying, we say in English, sometimes we say old is gold. So older things tend to be accepted as more authentic and more traditional and more accepted. So sometimes people will exaggerate the antiquity of a scripture or something like that. But here the point being made is if something gives us true spiritual knowledge, it doesn't really matter how old it is. Of course, the highest value is given to the Vedas, which are eternal in many Vedantic contexts and sects like Sri Vaishnavism. So there are different views on this, but basically it's not a matter of posing that something is older than another thing and therefore it must be correct or it must be better, or a person who is a more ancient saint is more correct than a more modern saint. Okay, so however, it is the Tamil writings of the Alvars that are prominent. Most of the Alvars composed and promulgated their views in Tamil, although a few amongst them have written in Sanskrit. Okay, so I only know of one, Kulashekara Alvar, who they say wrote the Mukundamala Stotram in Sanskrit, but I don't know of any other Sanskrit works of Alvars. So what he's talking about here is Mukundamala by Kulashekara Alvar, right? I don't know of any other Alvars that wrote in Sanskrit. They all wrote in Tamil. However, it is the Tamil writings of these Alvars that are prominent, and these have been codified into 4,000 or the Nalayira Prabandham. All the writings contained in this Prabandham are in the form of verses full of piety and devotion. These verses are also known as pasurams. So you can call them prabandhams, or a collection of them can be called prabandhams. The individual verses are mostly called pasurams in Tamil. The religious truths enshrined in them are not very difficult from those inculcated in the Sanskrit, are not very different from those inculcated in Sanskrit Vedas and important Puranas. Okay, I would say that the usual understanding by Sri Vaishnavas is that they are basically the Vedas put in Tamil. The same philosophy is there. Consequently, the Prabandham is considered to be as sacred as the Vedas, and in confirmation of this view, it is often spoken of as the Tamil Vedas. And in fact, it's going to explain it here. The equality of the Prabandham in Tamil with the Sanskrit Vedas is recognized, and so both of them are referred to today by the use of the term Ubhaya Vedanta. The word Ubhaya means both Vedantas. The Tamil Vedanta and the Sanskrit Vedanta, Ubhaya Vedanta. From the Prabandha, many stanzas may be quoted to prove that the views held regarding God in this world are exactly the same as are expressed in the Sanskrit Vedas. As examples, a few stanzas are selected and are quoted below. For a perusal of it, will be seen that Alwars express ideas about God and tattvas or principles, doctrines, almost identical with what is written in the Vedic writings and the Sanskrit Puranas. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce the Sanskrit Prabandhas here. He's given the original Sanskrit. The first one is from Tiruchanda Virutam by Tirumalasai Alwar, who was the fourth Alwar chronologically. He's one of the Mudal Alwars in the sense, Pogai Buddha Pei, and he's the disciple of Pei Alwar. So let's hear the translation. This is Tiruchanda Virutam number 1. O my Lord, you are the supporter of the 5 qualities pertaining to earth: sound, touch, form, taste, and smell. The 4 qualities of water: sound, touch, form, and taste. The 3 qualities of fire: sound, touch, and form. The 2 qualities belonging to the air: sound and touch. The single quality possessed of sound possessed by ether or sky. You are also the supporter of the devatas, the devas, and other things that are separate from you. Who can or who is able to guess how you are supporting and your true self? How you're supporting and your true self? Who can guess about that? Who can know that? Who can know God in truly or in full? So the next verse is from Tiruchanda Virutam 3. He says, O Lord, who is the first? You are the supporter of the 5 elements: earth, water, fire, air, and ether. Of the 5 senses of knowledge: touch, sight, hearing, taste, and smell. Of the 5 senses of action: mouth, hands, feet, buttocks, thighs. Of the organs of excretion and generation: the 5 tanmatras, right? So anybody who knows anything about the Sankhya system of evolution of matter, from subtle to gross, of creation, will understand all these terminology. Tanmatras, we could talk about some other time. It's a technical, the 5 tanmatras are technically 5 things in between that are mixtures of different things in the evolution of matter, in the evolution of the organs, of the sense organs, the working senses and the knowledge acquiring senses in that system of Sankhya. So the 5 tanmatras of Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha. So Shabda means, hearing, Sparsha means touching, Rupa means form, Rasa means taste, and Gandha means smell. And thus, you are supporting not only these 24 tattvas, right? So we have 24 tattvas here. He's listed 5 elements, 5 knowledge acquiring senses, 5 senses of action, 5 tanmatras, right? And then we're talking about, then he says, not only these 24 tattvas, but you are permeating all the living beings. You're permeating, you're all pervasive, Supreme Lord. You are permeating all the living beings, the souls, the atmas, the individual jivas. So far, the reference is to the Lila Vibhuti, or which is the name that Sri Vaishnavas give to this material world. The Nitya Vibhuti, or the eternal glory of God, is in the spiritual world. This is the glory of God, which has to do with his pastimes. Or this is all his pastimes here in this material world. This is called Lila Vibhuti of God, or the existence on this earth or universe. You are also staying in Paramapada. Paramapada means the supreme place, right? Sri Vaikuntham, wherein you are the supporter of 5 Shaktis, right? 5 Gyanendriyas, 5 knowledge acquiring senses, and 5 Kamendriyas, 5 working senses, 5 enjoyable sensual effects, all unconnected with this earth and hence different in nature, and the influencer of Bhogastanam, Bhoga Prakaranam, Munis, and Muktas. So it's a description of what's going on in Nitya Vibhuti. The latter part refers to his Nitya Vibhuti, or existence in Vaikuntha. Next we come to Tirachanda Virutam, number 5. And we can, anybody who's interested, you can go to, there's a site called Dravida Veda. Dravida means South Indian. Dravida Veda, meaning the Tamil Vedas or the Nalaya Divya Puranan. DravidaVeda.org. You can go to that website and you can look up the English translations for any of the 4,000 verses or pasarams of the Tamil pasarams of the Nalaya Divya Puranan. Okay, so Tirachanda Virutam. This is all by Tirumala Shayalwar. So Tirachanda Virutam number 5. Oh Lord, who is the first cause? I think, sorry, excuse me, there's an exclamation mark there. It means, oh Lord, who is the first cause? Meaning you're the first cause. You are permeating an Atman, or the soul, all the lifeless and living things, right? As Atman. As Atman means Paramatman here. The word Atman here means Paramatman. So you're permeating as Paramatman all the lifeless and living things that are varied in shape and form. So the Supreme Lord permeates everything. He permeates the souls, and he also permeates matter. And how do you do this? And how you do this will remain inexplicable forever and to the wise men. So even the wise people don't know how you do this, how you can permeate everything. Are you not the creator of the 4-faced Brahma from your navel formerly? So yeah, the what's being spoken of here is the Garbhodakshaya Vishnu form of Vishnu. And from his navel grows a lotus, and on that lotus is the 4-faced creator Brahma born. This is the idea. This is the story. So he's referencing that story. And now we come to Tirachanda Virutam number 10. Right? So he's missed out some of the verses here. If you want to read the whole Tirachanda Virutam, you go to that, DravidaVeda.org. Just as the ocean having waves that arise and spread in it, and which has white spaces, possesses also the power of causing and subsidence of the waves in itself. So you alone have the power by which all movable and immovable things originate and die, and finally get absorbed in you. Now we have Tirachanda Virutam number 12. You have created the universe. You have kept the universe within yourself. Again, you have appeared in this world as avatars. It is impossible. Avatars are the holy descents of the Lord, like Rama, like Krishna, like Narasimha, Varaha. He comes in different times, which is stated in the Bhagavad-Gita. Sambhavami yuge, eon after eon, age after age. I invent myself. I come down. I enter this material world to spread Dharma, religion, and to destroy the miscreants and to protect my devotees. So the whole universe is your body. This is a reference to the Shariri Bhava, the idea that the universe is the body of God, which is a panentheistic doctrine, philosophical doctrine, which is spoken of by Ramanuja in the Sri Bhashya, and also comes from the Upanishads, right? So right here we see saying that the Lord's body, the universe is the body of God, is a doctrine that comes in the Upanishads, in the Sanskrit Veda, and it's being stated again here in the Tamil Veda. So there's a link right there, very, very similar. And yet, you have a separate existence in Vaikuntha. So panentheism means not only does God's body, the universe is God's body, but at the same time, God has a separate existence in Vaikuntha. Hence, who could know your wonderful states? Tiruchanda Virutam number 17. O Lord, the cause of everything in this universe, who is existing in Vaikuntha as Paravasudeva. Paravasudeva means the Supreme Lord in Vaikuntha, and who appears as the three vyuhas, the three expansions, Sankarshana, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha, in the Pancharatric system. There's Vasudeva, Sankarshana, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. These are called the Chatur Vyuha. It's a concept of the supreme person and his first three emanations, and who appears as the three vyuhas, Sankarshana, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha, as the four murtis, the four forms, Pradana, Purusha, Avyakta, and Kala. Right? Pradana is a conglomeration of material nature. Purusha is the one that acts on that material nature and creates everything. Avyakta is unmanifestation, and Kala is time. Right? So these are also other principles, and these principles are also mentioned in the Upanishads. As the Bhoga Murti means the form of the enjoyer, right? Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad-Gita, he says, Yoginam, no, he says, I am the controller, I'm the only enjoyer. I am the Bhoktaram. Bhoktaram, the word Bhoga and Bhokta means the same thing. So Bhoktaram Yagyatapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram Suhidam Sarvabhutanam Yatvam Shanti Michati. That if you want to understand and you want to have peace, you should know the Supreme Lord is number one, is the enjoyer of everything, the enjoyer and controller of everything. So here it's said Bhogamurti. And the other two things which you have to know is that he's your dear friend, Suhridam Sarvabhutanam, and he is so Bhoktaram Yagyatapasam Sarvaloka, he's the owner of all planets and everything that be. So he's the owner and controller. Okay, so Bhogamurti, the supreme enjoyer, right, in which all the good is embodied as the Punya Murti. Punya Murti also, the Sri Vaishnava Punya means auspiciousness, the form of auspiciousness. We can say that God has Ananta Kalyana Gunas. He has, Guna means qualities, Kalyana means auspicious, and Ananta means unlimited. He has unlimited auspicious qualities, so therefore he can be called rightly Punya Murti, having an auspicious form, and innumerable Murtis. He also has innumerable forms that he can manifest from his one form. And finally, lying on Adishesha. Adishesha is Ananta, the first servant. Adishesha means the first servant of Sriman Narayana, who manifests as his in the form of a divine serpent, as his bed, and as his shoes, as his pillow, as many different other things. So finally, lying on Adishesha on the ocean of milk, right? So this is also a reference to Kshirodakshay Vishnu, who is at a place called Svetadweep, and he lies on Shesha, and he reclines on this white island, which has its shore lapped by the ocean of milk, where the Devatas go and pray to him to incarnate. And finally, as Archa Avatar. Archa Avatar means the deity in our puja room or in the temple in this world, the deities in the temple, that the Lord, there's another form of the Lord. So there are these different aspects. These are all spoken of in Pancharatra, which is Sanskrit literature. In the Pancharatra Samhitas or Tantras, it talks about this. It talks about Karnika, Vyuha, Vibhava, Antayamin, and Archa, right? So we have Paravasudeva, Karnika, right? The original personality of Godhead. Vyuha, Sankarshana, Pradyumna, Aniruddha, his first emanations, right? Then we have the Bhogamurti and the different avatars, the Punyamurtis, the different avatars. So Karika, Vyuha, Vibhava, the Vibhava avatars that we were discussing before, when the Lord incarnates as Matsya, Kurma, Varaha, Narasimha, Vamana, Krishna, Rama, like this Kalki. And then finally, so we have Karnika, Vyuha, Vibhava, Antaryamin, the super soul, which pervades all living and non-living beings, right? The Paramatman. And then finally, the Archavatar, the deity in the temple. These are the 5 forms of God which are spoken of in the Pancharatra. And we can see again here, those are also spoken of in the Nalaya Diviparanam by Tirumala Sayalra in his Tiruchandavirutam 17. So now we have Tiruchandavirutam 69. O blind men that worship the various devatas. Right, this is also described by Lord Krishna in Bhagavad-Gita. He says, those people who worship Anya devatas or other gods, right? They worship other devatas, other personalities, great personalities in this universe that are not the supreme personality, right? Those people are considered blind here. Right, they're also decried and their worship is decried also in the Bhagavad-Gita, which of course is famously part of the Mahabharata, but is called Mahabharata is considered to be like the 5th Veda, and so it's called Gita Upanishad. So it also contains many Upanishadic truths. But we can find that in the Upanishads also. But here it says, "O blind men that worship various devatas, that they're not Vaishnavas, whose very forms are hideous, whose stories are most unpleasant to hear, and who, even if sought for help, are incapable of giving you the help you very much desire, and those who thereby become worse, can you not get rid of the samsara in which you are entangled by worshiping the true one God who is mine?" So here, Tirumalasai Alwar is talking about the inability to get any help, real help, in this material world of samsara, this repeated world of birth and death, old age and disease, from other devatas, but only from Sriman Narayana, only from the Supreme Lord himself, like that. This is quite evident that Tirumalasai, he was stitching some of his cloth, and he was trying to thread the thread in the needle, and Lord Shiva was going over in a flower airplane or something like that, and Shiva came and said, "Can I help you?" And so because he's a great yogi, and so he said, "Can you help me to thread the needle like that?" Because he realized that Shiva can't give him liberation. What a yogi really wants is a yogi wants liberation, or a person who's spiritual. They actually want to be in Vaikuntha. They want to be in the Supreme Lord's Paramapada, the greatest, the highest place, and they want to serve. They want to serve the Supreme Lord, either here or there. They want to serve the Supreme Lord. That is their idea of liberation, and so he realized that Shiva couldn't do that for him. So he said, "No, there's nothing you can do for me unless you can help me to thread this needle," like that. So we're continuing on. Down the bottom here we have, not really sure what that is, but there's a small stanza here in Tamil. I don't know where that's from, and it doesn't mention here, but the translation is, "Permeating everything in this universe, creating all in the universe, swallowing the universe, and giving out the same, he is the Lord of everything." All the writings of the Alvars are full of bhakti of the higher kind only, right? So sort of selfless bhakti. The extreme doctrine of property and self-surrender underlies their outpourings. They firmly believe in the efficacy of this and believe in the intimate relationship between man and God. This becomes apparent when the following Tamil stanza is read, and this is from Nanmugan Tiruvandadi. number 7. Namugam Tiruvandari. So we have Muru Tiruvandari, Nirinda Tiruvandari, Muna Tiruvandari, and Namugam Tiruvandari. This is the 4th Tiruvandari. Tiruvandari is a type of Prabandha, a type of poetry, Tamil poetry, and this may also be by Tirumala Sayalwar, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so then he says, now this is Namugan Tiruvandari number 7. He says, whether today, tomorrow, later on, or a long time after, your grace is certainly mine. O Narayana, O Sriman Narayana, I very well know that I am not without you, and you without me. Nam Alwar, another Alwar, in his Tiruvai Moli, which is his magnum opus, 1,100 and I think 35 pasarams long. He says in the 2nd centum, 3rd decade, 4th verse, in return for thy great and good gift of mingling of my spirit with thee, I have entirely yielded up my spirit to thee. And that's according to him, that's a free translation. And also in Tiruvai Moli, in the 5th centum, 10th decade, verse 1, that verse, when rendered freely, says, thou splendid light of heaven, thou art in my heart melting and consuming my spirit. When shall I become one with thee? Okay, so the oneness that's being spoken of here is not absolute oneness in the sense of Adi Shankaracharya's Kevala Advaita philosophy, but it is extreme closeness to the Lord in order to serve the Lord personally. All the Alwaras, when they speak of God, view him as their teacher, father, mother, child, or beloved. So there are these different relationships that are felt, emotional relationships, or what we call in Sanskrit rasas, that are felt between the Alwar and God, and they manifest as being as the person, the Alwar feeling that he's the teacher, the father, the mother, the child, or the beloved of the beloved consort of God. So in most cases, the last is the view largely held. So in most cases, we're talking about the Alwars felt this type of, they felt God to be their beloved, like a consort. They felt like they were the girlfriend of God, or the wife of God. Okay. So many a critic is of the opinion that the use of the symbolism of love is objectionable and wrong. Such a critic has no conception of the higher love, and he generally thinks of the sensual attraction to be the chief characteristic of love. Higher love, or spiritual love, as understood and felt by some men and women, is certainly far above the level of the love that could be described only as bestial. It cannot be considered as a mere search after new sensations. The reputed women, Sita, Savitri, Damayanti of the Puranas, are ever remembered and their memories treasured up because of their love. Their love was of a higher kind. In the higher love, the souls of man and woman are attracted, and whether they are near each other or separated widely from each other through difficulties, mutual love or attraction is felt by them. Even death cannot break this link of mutual love. So he's talking about, some people criticize this idea of having the image of being a lover of God. Usually we find in the Western religions, the Semitic, Abrahamic religions like Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, they tend to think of God more as the master, as a vengeful God, as somebody who has to be feared. Many Christians will say this. They'll say, we are God-fearing people. Whereas the Alwars have a completely different attitude towards God. They're not fearing God. They are relating to God as I said, I'm here, as teacher, father, mother, child, but most importantly as beloved, as a consort in a type of spiritual love way. So he's just trying to explain that about spiritual love to people who maybe don't understand that idea. The Vaishnavite Alwars, when they look upon God as their beloved, are actuated only by this higher aspect of love, spiritual love. All their passions and longings are redirected to God, and they feel helpless in the absence of his presence, and highly satisfied when he is present. In short, when God is absent, they have a sense of desolation, and in his fellowship, they feel joy because of the preciousness of his love. The attachment to God, in the case of some Alwars, is so great that they are indifferent to all else in the world. And they don't see the world, they're just totally absorbed in the love of God. Like the Alwars, a Vaishnavite devotee merely tries to withdraw his desires from the creation, only to center them on the Creator. That is, he lifts his desires from earth to heaven. According to Manavala Mahamuni, who is the latest acharyas later acharya, or the last of the great acharyas of the Tengalai of the Southern School, quote, the pleasure which arises for the ignorant from sense objects, the same is called bhakti when directed to God. In the case of Nam Alwar, this bhakti has become love for the beautiful Lord. Hence the Alwars hence for Alwars, there arises the love type of devotion. Although many of those who use the symbolism of bride and bridegroom are quite free, although many of those who use the symbolism of bride and bridegroom are quite free from all traces of sensual context, and so morally impeccable, there are some who misunderstand this symbolism. Sri Vaishnavas can only consider this as being abnormal. As an example, it is only necessary to draw attention to what Mr. Chintamani Vaidya says in his book, Epic India, where he writes, we entirely disbelieve the truth of these stories. No more mischievous, though well-intentioned misrepresentations have ever sullied the fair name of a great man, page 422. And he adds further on, it is surely something exasperating, inconsistent, when those who recite Sri Krishna's Bhagavad-Gita should themselves believe that Sri Krishna indulged in amorous love with the gopis of Vrindavan, which in others would at once be set down as deeply irreligious, page 446. To this, I need add nothing, says Barnett in the preface of his book, The Heart of India. A Sri Vaishnava would say that both Barnett and Mr. Vaidya are evidently thinking only of love as usually understood by ordinary, not spiritual mortals. Further, this incident, which evidently alludes to the Rasa Krida, meaning the Rasa dance, right, the Rasa play of Lord Krishna in Vrindavan, according to the Sri Bhagavata Purana, occurred when Sri Krishna was a boy of only 7, 8, or 10 years of age. It is certainly preposterous to say that Krishna indulged in amorous love with the gopis of Vrindavan at that age. No South Indian Vaishnavite of any learning thinks of this love towards Krishna as of the same nature as the ordinary passion of love, right? Sexual love, let's say, conjugal love, as understood by the common people, right? So he totally rejects these guys' ideas. Since the Prabandhas, or the writings of the Alwars, were in Tamil, which is the language of the people, they were widely read. So the doctrines inculcated in these writings were clearly understood by the men. These teachings appealed to them better, and they became the general property of the people. From the writings of the Alwars, it's clear that they did not countenance, they could not bear, right, they did not countenance and uphold caste principles in the matter of God and salvation. I'll say that again, right? That's an important verse here. From the writings of the Alwars, it's clear that they did not hold caste principles in the matter of God and salvation. Any person endowed with good character and possessing good learning was considered to be a great man fit to be respected, right? So beyond caste distinctions. Even a Brahmin by birth may accept as a guru for mere learning any man of any caste, provided the guru possesses the necessary culture and character, right? So, and this is being written by this person who is traditionally a follower of the Deshika Sampradaya, the Wadagalai sect, the sect of Northern Sri Vaishnavas, who tend to have a little bit more caste distinctions in their ideas, and yet he's saying that. So, to this extent, the caste system was disregarded, though not for other purposes. So for some purposes, the caste system is still in place, but in talking about the matter of God and salvation, in the matter of taking somebody as your guru, like that, he's rejecting that. He's rejecting the caste system in that sense. In support of this, we may quote two stanzas or two pasarams of the Alwars. So this is from Tirumalai 42. This is by Tondradi Podialwa, who was a Tondradi Podialwa or Bhaktarni Reno, also sometimes called Vipranarayana. He was a Brahmin, and let's see. He says, the above, when translated, is as follows: God in the fort of Sri Rangam said as follows: "O men descended from Brahma," right? All men are descended from Brahma. All living beings are descended from Brahma. O men descended from Brahma, who are free from all mistakes and who are well versed in Vedas. People who are my real devotees must be treated with respect by you, even if they are of low birth. Teach them things that you know and learn from them things that they know. Saying thus, you seem to have ordained to treat your devotees as your equals and show them respect accordingly. Okay, so if anybody starts to talk about, he's given this a very nice quote about how caste is it may be in smarta sampradayas and in other sampradayas, the caste is more important, but here specifically is explained that. Right. By Tondradi Podialwa. Very good, very nice. Namalwar also expresses a similar sentiment in Tudavai Moli, third centum, 7th decade, verse number 9. So he says, if we descend below the four castes and come to Chandalas, who, however lacking in virtue, are true worshippers of God, who has in his right hand the chakra, right? God has in his right hand the chakra, meaning Lord Narayana. Their servants are my masters, and their feet are mine to worship, right? Amongst Vaishnava devotees, it is possible to quote many examples of men of lower castes being held in great respect. Even amongst the Alwars, there were men of castes other than Brahman, right? And of even low caste, very low caste. Even Ramanuja held similar views. But to add that, he admitted into the Brahman caste a large number of people of other castes seems to Sri Vaishnavas to be preposterous and to show absence of an intimate knowledge of Vaishnavism and Vaishnavite Brahmins. Right, so that's his idea. Okay. To Ramanuja, men who believed in Vishnu as the supreme being and followed the principles of Vaishnavism with all Vaishnavites, and they were all equal in religious views and so entitled to great respect. But Ramanuja never interfered with the social order, and in fact, he seems to have upheld and favored the Varnashram Dharma. All men, in whatever caste, they may belong are entitled to the grace of God, but this does not mean that he ignored caste principles. Okay, so there's a famous story about Ramanuja. When he was very old, he used to lean on someone to go to the river to take bath and to come back. So he would lean on a Brahmin when going to the river, and then after bathing and becoming pure and performing Sandhyavandana, being pure, he would lean on a non-Brahmin Sri Vaishnava or a Shudra Sri Vaishnava on the way back. And he wanted to show that all Vaishnavas are considered pure in the eyes of God. Okay. At the same time, you'll find amongst the Sri Vaishnava communities, even the Wadagalas or the Tengalis in India, you'll find a certain amount of adherence to the Varnashram system. They will follow some caste rules, some class rules. Sri Vaishnavism is always connected with Ramanuja, at any rate in South India, because Vaishnavism was crystallized and was clearly understood only after him. The Vishishtadvaita views constitute the central ideas of the Vaishnavites, and though held by many of Ramanuja's predecessors, it is only after the writing of Sribhashya by Ramanuja that people had definite and clear views about God, the soul, and matter, which are the three principal tattvas or principles in this material world, which are spoken about in Vedanta. So today, every Sri Vaishnava in South India who claims to know something of his religion believes God to be immanent, both in this material world and in the spiritual universe. God is to them not merely a mental abstraction, remaining aloof from the world, looking down upon men as an autocrat. The Abrahamic religions in the West, like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, they tend to think of God as being, they have a doctrine which is more or less what is called deistic. Deism means that God created everything, he got everything going. Maybe in the ancient times, during the time of when the scriptures were written, he was doing something in this world, but he sort of has retired now to his heaven, and he lets it all go on automatically like that. Whereas amongst Vaishnavites and Hindus in general, they very much understand that God is immanent, is not only transcendent, but he's also intimately associated with this material world and constantly doing things in this material world. So he is both transcendent and immanent. God is to them not merely the mental abstraction remaining aloof from the world, looking down upon men as an autocrat. God is conceived by them as existing in the soul and in matter, and in fact, in everything is dependent upon him. In other words, Sri Vaishnavas think that God joins them in their experiences of life, shares in their views, and works for the uplifting or the upbuilding of the world. In the succession list of acharyas and alvars, which every devout Sri Vaishnava remembers, right? So normally every day we remember, we do what's called Guru Parampara Anusandhanam. We meditate deeply upon the lineage of acharyas and alvars that we come in, and that this is done while chanting prayers to them. There's some very standard prayers called Podutaniyan. Podutaniyan means the main pranam mantras, or the main prayers of respect for the lineage, like that. So we recite those, and we remember that Guru Parampara, the lineage of teachers and alvars. So alvars and acharyas, which every Sri Vaishnava remembers, and which is already quoted. The alvars are referred to by only one name, and that is Namalvar. Of the beings of this world, alvars are considered to be the most prominent and greatest. And this is what I said before, that in the lineage, in terms of the lineage, Namalvar is spoken of as between Vishvaksena and Natamuni in the Guru Parampara, in the lineage. But the other alvars are also there to be understood when we say Namalvar, or praise Namalvar as one of the lineage, that the other alvars are also included in that. Of the beings of this world, alvars are considered to be the most prominent and the greatest amongst them. Namalvar holds a very high place both on account of his personal character and his writings. His writings are more philosophical and contain much of the religious beliefs and treats of everything from a high plane. His writings are believed to be the epitome of the teachings of the Vedas, Rig, Yajus, and Sama. The Tiruvaimoli, which is the best known and most popular of his works, is believed to be the repository of grand truths echoed in the Samaveda. It is the clearest and most distinct exposition of the eternal truths of the Vedas. And there are many commentaries given on Tiruvaimoli of Namawar. It consists of 1,102 stanzas divided into 10 chapters. See, I was wrong. I said 1,135. It's 1,102 pasurams or stanzas in Tamil in 10 chapters. The chapters are all called centums. So they're consisting of 100 or so verses each. Since the writings of the Alwars and the Acharyas have a profound influence on the Vaishnavite movement, it is necessary to take a brief view of their lives and doings, at least the most important personages amongst them. Of the Alwars, Namawar may be singled out as representative of his class, representative of the other Alwars. Namawar was born in Srinagari, also called Alwar Tirunagari today, which is down in Tirunelveli district in the very southern tip of India, on the 43rd day of the present Kali Yuga. So right at the beginning of Kali Yuga. That's the traditional date. He is considered to be an Amsa. When we say Amsa, we mean a part or an incarnation of Vishvaksena, Senadinatan, Senainatan, which is the Lord Vishnu's commander-in-chief of his army or personal secretary, Vishvaksena. The leader of the divine hosts of Lord Vishnu in Sri Vaikuntham. He was called Maran by his parents because as a child he ate no material, such as milk, etc. So he didn't eat, as a child he didn't eat anything. He was laid in a cradle tied to a tamarind tree, which is held to be a sacred tree even now. Some of the Orthodox Sri Vaishnavas keep along with, and that tamarind tree is still living and is still there in the temple, which marks his birthplace and marks the place where he was sitting under this tamarind tree and meditating. Some of the Orthodox Sri Vaishnavas keep along with other materials of worship a bit of bark from this tamarind tree. The tamarind tree is called Tirupuli Alwar. Puli, Tiru means tree or auspicious. Puli means tamarind, and Alwar is the name that we have of the Alwar. So some other things are named Alwar also sometimes. So Tirupuli Alwar is the name of that tamarind tree under which Namawar sat. And in fact, I have a piece of that bark myself, having visited Alwar Tirunagari and tried not to, of course, injure the tree, but taken a piece of bark from the tree. So he had not any kind of touch with this world, even afterwards, after he was born. It is generally held that he was endowed with all perfections, even from his childhood. Since he was not connected to this world and its affairs, he never knew the ways of the world. Because of his perfection in all ways, people think that he should be considered to be superior to all the other Alwars. He is therefore described as the soul and the other Alwars as his body. So Buddha Alwar, Pogai Alwar, and Pei Alwar represent his eye, his head, his eyes and his face respectively. So these are the first. If we go from head to toe, probably it'll go from head to toe chronologically of the Alwars. So Buddha, Pogai, and Pei were the first Mudal Alwars, the first three Alwars. Right? So they're the head, eyes, and face of Namawar. So his neck and hands coming down, Tilumalashai Alwar, the fourth Alwar, then Kulashekara Alwar, Tirupan Alwar, respectively. Right? So Tirumalashai, Kulashekara, and Tirupan Alwar, his neck and his hands, his two hands, respectively. His breasts and his chest and his navel Tondaradipodi, and Tirumangai Alwar, respectively. And the Alwar, Madhurakavi, forms his feet, because Madhurakavi was his servant. So whenever we talk about an Acharya, or we talk about an Alwar like that, whenever we talk about the feet of that Acharya or the feet of that of the Alwar, it's always the feet are personified as the servant of that Alwar. For instance, if we go to Perinambi Tirumalage Mahapurna, the guru of Ramanuja, if we go to his ashram, there's a deity of him, and at his feet is a deity of Ramanuja, part of the deity at the feet. If we take the sandals of Lord Ranganatha, they represent Adishesha or Sadagopan, let's say, right? And Namalwar. If we take the sandals of Namalwar, they represent Madhurakavi Alwar. If we take the shoes of Mahapurna, they represent Ramanuja. If we take the shoes of Ramanuja, they represent his disciples, like that. So Namalwar is believed to have seen directly the Lord, and thus realized in himself and in the infinite nature and powers of the Supreme Being. He was always anxious to save humanity without distinction of caste, creed, or sex. Yeah, why Andal is not considered part of this analogy? That's interesting. That's interesting. So I don't know exactly where this analogy of the body of Namalwar is. Andal may be considered separate because she's considered the consort of the Lord. I don't know why. That's a good question. I can ask that to somebody who knows about this analogy and where this analogy actually comes from, because the author hasn't mentioned where he gets this analogy from, but it's an interesting analogy. So Namalwar was always anxious to save humanity without distinction of caste, creed, or sex. It was this that made him pour forth his religious ideas and views in the language of the people, which was Tamil. Right, so we see this throughout India and through all the many different Vaishnava sampradayas. We have the example of Tulsidas, who wrote the Ramayana in Hindi or Advani, right, a form of Hindi. We have the Kamba Ramayana in Tamil Nadu. The Ramayana was written translated from Sanskrit into Tamil by Kamba. So we have this example in India that many of the scriptures, the Sanskrit scriptures, were translated into the vernacular languages of each place, and great saints have done that. So here we have the example of the Alwars, who spoke in the language of the people in Tamil Nadu. They spoke in Tamil, and so everybody could understand them, and they didn't need to know Sanskrit. They didn't need to understand the meaning of the Vedas. So it's very important. The Nalaya Divi Prabandham is so important from that point of view, that it gives easy access to many people to the ideas of Vedanta, like that. Now, of course, for those people who don't know Sanskrit and who also don't know Tamil, we now have to have translations of both the Tamil Vedanta and the Sanskrit Vedanta, and we can read them both and understand them both. So what does it say here? How do we get to this page? It was this that made him pour forth his religious ideas and views in the language of the Tamil people, Tamil. In his Tirubai Moli, already referred to, he was very short-lived and he died in his 35th year. That's about Namalwar. Madhurakavi, right? His disciple was born in Tirukoilur, who was considered to be an Amsa of Kumuda. Kumuda is one of the Ganas in one of the hosts in Vaikuntha. Kumuda, Kumudaksha, Pundarika, Sarvanetra. If you study Pancharatri, you'll understand all of the servants of the Lord that have different names of the traditional eternal servants of the Lord called Nityasuris in Sri Vaikuntha. Kumuda is one of them. So this Madhurakavi is considered to be an incarnation of Kumuda. An angel near God in Vaikuntha was a shield and shadow of Namalwar. So he was his disciple, and he wrote one prabandham called Kaninun Siddhatamba, which he praised Namalwar in. Madhurakavi survived his master and lived for 50 years after him. So he lived till his 85th year. He traveled about widely in South India, singing Prabandhas and proclaiming his master's story. And in fact, the story of how Madhurakavi came to meet Namalwar is that he was actually in North India, in Mathura, and he saw a star and followed the star and came to the place underneath the star where the tamarind tree and Namalwar was there. And if you get this book, The Holy Lives of the Alwars, you can read the full story of all the Alwars' lives and you can understand about them.
Om Namo Narayanaya. Om Namo Narayanaya.